We talked about rate. Now I'm going to go down here to the Ecg Wave section and talk about what the individual waves are. I'm going to go into very, very little detail right now. So if you've seen a 12 lead EKG before, and you've probably seen this in your life, even if you haven't seen a 12 lead, this is your normal looking heart rate, or heartbeat I should say, on an EKG. You have this little hump here, you have this big spike, and you have another hump afterwards. And they basically just follow each other like that. They should all typically look the same. So this first hump right here is called the P wave. This big spike is collectively called the Qrs Complex. And then you have this hump here called the T wave. That's it. You have a P, QRS, T, PQRST. So that whole complex, the P, QRS, T, that represents your heart contracting. So each of those waves has some significance. And there's also, you'll see on here, these letters, like there's a J, doesn't matter right now, it's very minor. It has some significance, but doesn't matter yet. There's also this U wave. It does matter a little bit, but for basic interpretation, does not matter. We'll get into that later. So P, what does it represent? It just represents atrial depolarization. You have the four chambers of the heart. This is when the atria contracts, or when the atria depolarizes, you get a P wave. Next, as the electrical complex goes down towards the ventricles, you get this QRS complex. It's a big spike. You can see that the amplitude of it in the millivolts we talked about is much higher than the P wave. That's because there's a lot more myocardium in the ventricles, so you get this big spike. You get an initial downward deflection, goes up into a big R wave, and then it goes down into a big S wave that's usually the same height as the R wave. And then it goes up again, returns to baseline, and then you get the T wave. So this QRST is all coming from the ventricles. The QRS is the ventricular depolarization, and the T wave is the ventricular repolarization. Ventricle depolarizes, then repolarizes. So then you may be wondering, if we have atrial depolarization, where's the atrial repolarization? It actually does occur. It's just, there's been two schools of thought that I've read. One is that it's hidden behind the QRS. I think I read recently that's not really true. It's just that the amplitude of the atrial repolarization is so small, it's just not going to be picked up by the electrocardiogram, so you're not going to see it. Versus the ventricular repolarization, it's got a big enough amplitude that you can see it. Again, I'm not going to get into like the physiology of why the waves are the way that they are. There's a great book, I'm going to show it to you right here. It's called Pathophysiology of Heart Disease by Lilly. I recommend this if you want to see the science of like why the EKGs look the way they do. There's also other EKG books, but that's a great one, and it goes into this. So that's really all you need to know about what those waves are. This website will go into the morphology of them, and I'm not going to talk about those right now. This is what you would look for like normal wave-like morphology, etc. Yeah, so you can look at how the different atria can be enlarged. They can represent on EKG. I don't really want to talk about that. I don't think that's important for you at this level as a medical student. But we can, if we see them in a clinical case later on, we can talk about them. Yeah, so, and I want you to read these. It's just I don't feel like they're worth spending time on. So if you want to read more about the P wave and the different pathologies, go on here, click P wave. So I've kind of talked about the QRS and T. Each of them is going to have their own pathologies. Like the QRS can widen, it can be narrow, it can the T wave can be inverted, it can be really big, and we'll get into those, but I don't want to get into it yet. I want you guys just to know what a P, QRS, and T waves represent, which you do now at this point. So next, I think we should go into Ecg Rhythm. We've talked about the Ecg rate. You kind of understand what a PQRST or what those letters even mean. Now we'll go into rhythm.